Chapter 18. Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil. For all the commotion over the reversal of Jim Williams' conviction, the Georgia Supreme Court's ruling appeared to be little more than a temporary reprieve. The hole in the floor had been an unimportant detail in the trial. The main points of evidence in Spencer Lawton's case against Williams still remained intact. It seemed obvious that Williams would have to mount a stronger defense in his second trial, or the outcome would likely be another conviction. Williams was exultant nonetheless. He boasted that the reversal had vindicated him completely. He gloated that the wording of the ruling proved that Spencer Lawton and the police were liars. Williams dropped hints that, indeed, his defense would be stronger the second time around. "Things will be going my way from here on," he would say with a wink and a sly look. "Certain forces are at work." He deliberately left his listeners wondering whether he meant to say simply that the public sympathy had shifted in his favour, or, more darkly, that the fix was in. One evening, Williams invited me to drop in at Mercer House. I found him sitting at his desk, having a vodka and tonic. He regaled me with stories about two of his latest pet subjects, the corrupt Spencer Lawton and the biased and stupid Judge Oliver. Then he came around to the subject of the mysterious forces working on his behalf. "You know, I never had any doubt the Supreme Court would throw out my conviction," he said. "I knew all along they would do it. I was absolutely sure of it. You know why? Because I refused to allow myself even to think they would reject my appeal. If I had thought about it, if I had dwelt on it, I would have become depressed and imagined the worst, and then the worst would have happened." I could feel Williams watching me closely, weighing my reaction. "Concentration," he went on. "That's what it was. Just like that little experiment I told you at Duke University, with the dice. I improved the odds in my case, the same way the man at Duke did with the dice, the same way I do when I play my little game of psycho dice, through mental kinetics. You may think this all nonsense," he went on. "Most people do. And all I can say to them is, fine, don't believe it. I'm not out to prove anything. But if you're overlooking a valuable power available to anyone—" Williams smiled enigmatically, but I could tell he was not joking. "Of course I have had help," he said. "I'm not the only person who has been concentrating on my behalf. I've had the assistance of someone very expert in these things. And I can tell you that when my second trial comes up, the judge, the DA, and whoever gets to sit in that jury will be at the receiving end of some very powerful vibrations." Williams took a handful of dimes out of his pocket and put 9 of them in a neat stack on the desk blotter. "I use the word vibrations for want of a better word," he said. "These vibrations, these thought waves, whatever you want to call them, will be generated by me and a woman named Minerva. She's an old and very dear friend. She lives in Beaufort, South Carolina, about 45 minutes from here. I am going to pay her a visit tonight." Williams opened a drawer and took out a bottle of water. "This is rainwater," he said. "Minerva told me to bring it with me tonight. She also told me to bring the dimes. These things will be coming into play later on tonight." Williams looked up at me. "If you're game, you're welcome to come along. It will take 2 or 3 hours at the most. Interested?" "Sure, why not?" I said. As soon as I had said it, I thought of a dozen reasons why not, but it was too late. Half an hour later, we went out through the back of Mercer House to the carriage house, where a green Jaguar sports car was parked on an oriental carpet. Williams set his vodka and tonic on the control panel and eased the car out into Wayne Street. In moments, We were gliding through the quiet streets of Savannah, up and over the Talmadge Bridge, and out into the darkness of the South Carolina low country. The light of the dashboard cast a pale glow on William's face. "If I told you that Minerva was a witch doctor or a voodoo priestess, I'd be close," he said. "She's that and more. She was the common law wife of Dr. Buzzard, the last great voodoo practitioner in Beaufort County. Whether you know it or not, you are in the heart of voodoo country. This whole coastal area has been loaded with it since the slaves brought voodoo with them from Africa. Dr. Buzzard died a few years ago, and Minerva carries on his practice. For years, Dr. Buzzard was king of the low country root doctors. He was a commanding presence, tall, erect, and rail thin. He had a goatee, and he wore purple-tinted glasses. No one who saw those eyes staring directly through the purple lenses ever forgot them. He was especially effective defending clients in criminal cases. He'd sit in the courtroom and glare at hostile witnesses as he chewed the root. Sometimes they'd change their stories when they got on the stand and saw Dr. Buzzard staring at them. Either that, or they'd just turn tail and run. Dr. Buzzard would focus his energies on the jury and the judge, too. I know a judge in Savannah who says he can tell when the root workers are involved in the case, because his bench will be dressed down. He'll find roots and herbs and bones arranged around it. Dr. Buzzard made a good living. People would pay him to put curses on their enemies, or to remove a curse that the enemy had put on them. In some cases, he was paid by both parties. The money piled up. Dr. Buzzard built 2 big churches on St. Helena Island and always drove around in big flashy cars. He was quite a ladies' man, too, and in his last years Minerva became his mistress. Williams took a sip from his drink, then set it back into its holder on the control panel. When Dr. Buzzard died, Minerva put on his purple glasses and set herself up as a root doctor. She uses some of his techniques and some of her own, too. She gets her special status and some of her spiritual power by having direct access to Dr. Buzzard in perpetuity. She goes to his grave and calls on his spirit constantly. Williams had said that he did not himself believe in voodoo. "I don't put much stock in the hocus-pocus part of it, the roots and the herbs and the powdered bones and frogs' tongues and all of that. They're only props. But I do have respect for the spiritual force behind it. Minerva told me to bring 9 shiny dimes tonight, and some fresh water that ain't run through no pipe." The dimes were easy, but her instructions about the water meant I either had to get it from a stream or find some rainwater. There happened to be a rainwater in my basin in my courtyard. That's what's in the bottle. "Would she know the difference if you had just filled it with tap water?" I asked. "Not from the look or the taste," he said, "but she'd know in an instant just by looking at my face." The town of Beaufort was dark and still. Williams drove along the main street, passing the great old houses that faced the harbour towards the sea islands, 18th century mansions of brick, tabby, and wood. Halfway between Savannah and Charlestown, Beaufort had once been a major shipping centre, but now it was an almost forgotten, perfectly preserved, gem-like little village. We cruised along the narrow streets, passing rows of handsome white houses gleaming in the darkness. The tidy, well-manicured section of town gave way shortly to unpaved streets and tiny run-down cottages. We pulled up in front of a wooden shanty with a sand-swept front yard. The house was unpainted except for the door and windows, which were a light blue. "Haint blue," said Williams. "It keeps the evil spirits out." The house was dark. Williams knocked lightly, then pushed the door open. The flickering light from a TV set was the only illumination in the cluttered front room. Pungent cooking smells of pork and greens filled the air. A man lay asleep on a daybed. He stirred as we entered. A young black woman came into the room through a curtained doorway carrying a plate of food. She nodded towards the back of the house without saying a word, and we moved on through. Minerva was sitting in a small room under a bare light bulb. She was like a sack of flour. Her cotton dress was stretched tight over her round body. Her skin was a pale brown, and her face was as round as a tranquil moon. Her grey hair was pulled back in a bun except for two little pigtails, one hanging over each ear. She wore a pair of purple-tinted, wire-rimmed glasses. The table in front of her was piled high with bottles, vials, twigs, boxes, and odd bits of cloth. The floor was littered with shopping bags, some bulging, some empty. When she saw Williams, she broke into a broad, gap-toothed smile and motioned for us to sit down on two folding chairs. "I've been waiting on you, baby," she said in a half-whispered voice. "Well, how have you been, Minerva?" Williams asked. Minerva's face clouded over. "I've been dealing with a lot of graveyard dirt." "Not again," said Williams. Minerva nodded. There's a lot of grudgefulness and deceitfulness." Minerva spoke in a faraway voice. It came from so deep within her that the words sounded as if they had been uttered eons ago on a distant planet and had just now reached the earth through her. "My son's ex-wife. She had 3 children with him. She drive by and throw graveyard dirt in my porch. I gets about a bucketful. That's how come I be blocked a lot. Business gets po'. Then my boy gets in trouble with the police. I can't sleep, and I've been raising hell with my old man that's dead." "Dr. Buzzard?" "Yeah, him," said Minerva. "I need to get me some money, and I've been playing the numbers so I can get some. I always go to him and I pay him a dime for him to give me a number, but he won't give me one for shit. I cuss he ass out. I don't know why he want me to get no money." Minerva put aside a small wax doll she had been working on. "Well, it looks like we in business again, you and me, don't it?" "Yes," said Williams. "Now we got a second trial to work on." "Yes, I know that." Minerva leaned forward and brought her face close to Williams. "He's working hard against you, baby." "Who is?" Williams was startled. "Not Dr. Buzzard." No, Minerva said. "The boy. The dead boy." "Danny? Well, it don't surprise me. He planned this whole thing. He knew I was getting tired of his damned games. He knew that I had $25,000 in cash in that house that night because I was going to Europe on a buying trip. It was his big chance. He could kill me and take it." Minerva shook her head. "That boy is working hard against you." "Well, is there something you can do about it?" "I can try," she said. "Good, because there's something else I want you to do too," said Williams. "What's that, baby?" "I want you to put a curse on the district attorney." "Well, of course. Tell me his name again." "Spencer Lawton. Lawton.
Yeah, I worked his name before. Tell me what's going on with him since we got you off."
"He's desperate. He's been district attorney now for 2 years, and he's never won a case himself in court. He's mortified. People are laughing at him."
They gonna keep on laughing. Did you bring those things like I told you to?"
Minerva asked. Yes, said Williams, I did.
Water that ain't run through no pipe?
Uh-huh.
And did you put it in a quart jar, no label on it, and no metal cap?
Yes.
And those 9 shiny dimes?
They're in my pocket.
Okay, baby. Now I want you to sit down and do something for me.
Minerva gave Williams a quill pen and a bottle of red ink labeled Dove's Blood.
Write Spencer Lawton's name on this piece of paper 7 times. Connect the 2 names as one. Dot no I's and cross no T's. Now, while you do that, I'll do some work over here.
Minerva began filling a plastic shopping bag with odd items. 2 trowels, pieces of cloth, some bottles. Somewhere on the table, under all the piles of stuff, a telephone rang. Minerva dug out the receiver.
Okay. Uh-huh. Now listen to me.
She spoke in a half whisper.
She wants you back, but she wants you running behind her, begging. Remember what I told you. Before you sleep with her again, put a tablespoon of honey in the bath and take a honey bath. After you have sex, dry yourself off with that piece of muslin cloth I gave you. Hang it up to dry. Do not wash it. Later on, wrap it around a purple onion and tie the corners with a square knot. Huh? I say a square knot. That knot I showed you. 2 knots makes 1. Okay. Then all you gotta do is bury the cloth where Sheila will walk past it or pass by. Uh-huh. Now, darling, don't you depend on her to give you too much money, 'cause she won't give you none. That's why her and her husband don't get along. She ain't gonna be issuing out no money. And listen, be careful about your personal belongings. Your dirty socks, your dirty undershorts, your hair, pictures of your head. She might try to take them to someone like me. Put a picture of her in your wallet in a secret place between things, with her head upside down. Do that for me. Uh-huh. That's right. And let me know. Bye-bye.
Minerva looked across the table at Williams.
You done, baby?
Yes, he said.
Okay. Now you know how dead time works. Dead time lasts for 1 hour. From a half hour before midnight to a half hour after midnight. The half hour before midnight is for doing good. The half hour after midnight is for doing evil.
Right, said Williams.
Seems like we might need a little of both tonight,
said Minerva.
So we best be on our way. Put the paper in your pocket where the dimes is, and take your bottle of water. We going to the flower garden.
Minerva picked up her shopping bag and headed out the back door. We followed close behind as she made her way down the lane with a slow and ponderous stride. As she approached the next house, an old man got up from the chair on the porch and went inside. A window in another house closed. A door shut somewhere. 2 men standing beside an oleander bush parted when they caught sight of Minerva and withdrew into the darkness. In a few moments we reached the end of the lane. The silver of a new moon hung like a slender cradle over a grove of tall, dark trees. We were at the edge of a graveyard. On the far side, 100 yards beyond the trees, a flood-lit basketball court cast out a pale grey light into the graveyard. A boy was bouncing a ball and taking shots at the basketball hoop. Thunk, 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 prong. Otherwise, the graveyard was deserted.
A lot of people does this kind of work,
Minerva said.
But it looks like we got the garden all to ourselves tonight.
We walked single file into the graveyard, taking a winding route and stopping finally at a grave under a large cedar tree. My first thought was this was a new grave, because unlike the others, the soil appeared to be freshly spread on top of it. Minerva knelt by the headstone. She reached into the shopping bag and gave Williams a trowel.
Go to the other end and dig a hole 4 inches deep with this spade, she said. Drop one of the dimes into it and cover it up.
Williams did as she said. The earth came up with no effort at all. The grave had clearly been dug into and churned so often that the soil was as loose as sand in a sandbox. I stood a few yards back and watched. Minerva and Williams were like two people facing each other on the opposite ends of a picnic blanket. They faced each other over the bones of Dr. Buzzard.
Now's the time for doing good, said Minerva. First, we gotta get that boy to ease off a little. Tell me something about him.
He tried to kill me, said Williams.
I know that. Tell me something before that.
Well, Williams cleared his throat. Danny was always getting into fights. He got mad at his landlord once and threw a chair through the man's window. Then he went outside and tore up the man's car with a brick. Another time he got angry at an exterminator who had been hired to spray his apartment, so he punched him in the eye, banged his head on the pavement, and then, later, after the man had swore out a police warrant against him, took a baseball bat and chased him around Madison Square, screaming that he was going to kill him. He bragged to me once that he had fired 5 shots from a pistol at some guy on a motorcycle, because the guy was trying to date the same barmaid Danny was seeing at the time. One bullet hit the guy in the foot. His mother had to get police protection from him. She took out a peace warrant against him, which meant if he came within 50 feet of her, he'd be arrested. Minerva wrapped her arms around herself and shivered.
It ain't doing no good, she said. That boy is still working hard against you.
She thought for a moment.
Tell me something good he's done.
I can't think of anything, said Williams.
All he ever done was bad things. What made him happy?
His Camaro, said Williams. He loved that Camaro. He used to zoom around in it and see how many wheels he could get off the ground at once. If he turned a corner real fast, he could usually get 2 wheels in the air. When he drove out to Tybee, he liked to shoot up over that bump in the road leading onto the Lazaretto Creek Bridge, because if he hit it at just the right time, he could get all 4 wheels off the ground at the same time. He loved doing that. He wouldn't let anybody touch that car. It was his pride and joy. He painted it with a spray can, flat black, just the way he wanted it. He'd spend hours fixing it and cleaning it and painting those racing stripes on it. And he was very good at that, painting those stripes and the little curlicues. He was very creative. That's something most people didn't understand about Danny. He was an artist. He flunked every subject in school except for art. He always got an A in art. Of course, his talent wasn't developed. He didn't have the patience. I have a couple of his paintings. They're full of fantasy and they're wild, but you can see they're full of fantasy and they're wild, but you can see that he has talent. I used to tell him, Danny, do something with this. You're good at it. But he could never apply himself to anything. He never got past the 8th grade, but he was quick-witted and bright. One time I paid him to dismantle 2 crystal chandeliers at Mercer House and clean them. When he was just about finished reassembling them, I noticed he detached all the little prisms backward. There were hundreds of them. I explained that each of the prisms was like a diamond ring, and that the flat surface had to face out, and the pointed surface had to face inwards, otherwise it wouldn't sparkle. I told him he'd have to take them all off and put them on back the right way. I said I'd pay him for the extra time it took. Well, he looked at that chandelier. He looked at it real long, like it was a rattlesnake. Then he climbed down from the ladder and said, "The hell with it. I'm out of here. I ain't serving no prism sentence." I laughed at his pun. I thought it was delightful. He turned around and stormed out of the house, but I could see out of the corner as his mouth was turned up in a little grin. It pleased him that I'd laughed at his joke. Minerva smiled.
"I felt him backing off a little,"
she said. "What do you mean?" asked Williams.
"I felt it just as you were saying those things about him. I felt that boy ease up some."
"Why do you suppose that happened?" Williams asked.
"He heard you say you loved him,"
Minerva said. "What? But he tried to kill me."
"I knew he was working against you, baby, and now I know what he was trying to do. He was trying to make you hate him. He wants you to show the world you hate him. That way, they'll think you hated him bad enough to kill him in cold blood. If you do that, you will surely go to jail, and he knows it."
"I have every right to hate him," said Williams. "He tried to kill me."
"He paid a heavy price for it. Now he's trying to make you pay a heavy price too."
Minerva turned her shopping bags upside down and hurriedly spread the contents in front of her.
"We ain't got time to argue. This was the opening I was looking for. Now I can get to work. Quick, we ain't much time left. Must be near midnight. Dig another hole and put that another dime in it. And this time think about that boy's Camaro. Come on, do it. Think about them pretty stripes the boy painted on it and how good he done it."
William silently dug another hole and dropped another dime in. Minerva dug a hole at her end and slipped a root into it. Then she covered it up and sprinkled it with a white powder.
"Now dig another hole. And this time, think about that boy's 2 paintings you got. Think about how good they was. We trying to keep him off your case. He's backing off. Oh, he's backing off. I feel it."
Minerva took a twig and poked it into the ground several times, mumbling and chanting as she did. She sprinkled some more powder and then drew a circle in the dirt.
"You through, baby? Now do it another time and think about that prism sentence. Think about how it made you laugh. And think about how your laughing made that boy smile. Do that for me."
Minerva continued her ministrations over the head of Dr. Buzzard, while down at the old man's feet Williams silently dug yet another hole.
"Now do it one more time," said Minerva. "And this time, drop the rest of the dimes into the hole and think about all them things together. And think about anything else that was good about the boy that maybe you ain't told me yet."
Minerva watched as Williams followed her instructions.
"Now, take that bottle and pour a little water on each of the covered up holes, so your kindly thoughts about that boy will take root and flower and come back to bless you."
Minerva closed her eyes and sat in silence for several minutes. A church bell began to chime at the hour of midnight. She opened her eyes again and quickly picked up a plastic purse. She scooped a trowel of dirt into it.
Graveyard dirt works best when it comes from a grave right at midnight, she said. This ain't for your job, though, baby. This is for my private use.
She sighed.
Black magic never stops. What goes from you comes to you. Once you start this shit, you gotta keep it up. Just like the utility bill, just like the grocery store, or they kill you. You gotta keep it up. 2, 5, 10, 20 years.
The purse was now bulging with dirt. She put it back into her shopping bag.
It's after midnight now, she said. Time for doing evil. I'm gonna work on the DA. He's a man, so I will cross sex with him and go to 9 different dead women. 9. I will call them 3 times. I cannot guarantee they will all be in your favor, but somewhere down the line there will be an opening, and the dead will settle with him the way they did last time. Take that piece of paper out your pocket, the one with his name written on it, and lay it on the ground flat with the writing facing up.
Williams did what he was told.
Now fold the paper over once, and then fold it again. Then put it back in your pocket, okay? Now, you just sit quiet while I call on the dead.
Minerva spoke unintelligible words in her dreamy, half-whispered voice. All I could make out were the names of the dead women. Viola, Cassandra, Serenity, Larcinia, Delia. Minerva used every prop she had brought with her, roots, charms, powders, squares of cloth. She put them on the ground in front of her and stirred them with 2 sticks as if mixing a voodoo salad. Then, one by one, she put all the items back into her shopping bag. When she was done, she looked at Williams.
Walk to the edge of the graveyard and wait for me there,
she said.
And don't look back. I got some more work to do here.
Williams and I walked away. After a few steps, I ducked behind an oak tree where I could still see Minerva. She began to mutter. Her mutters became moans. The moans became wails. The wailing grew louder and louder. Minerva's arms fluttered and wheeled like small propellers. When she was finally out of breath, her hands fell to her lap. She bowed her head in silence for a moment. The only sound in the graveyard was the thunk, thunk, thunk of a basketball bouncing in the distance. At length, Minerva spoke in an urgent whisper.
Listen to me, old man. Why you doing me this way? Tell me why. I give you dimes, I ask for a number, but you won't give me one for shit. You lay there night after night, laughing at me. Didn't I do right by you? Didn't I wait for you in the bed when you was old and tired and your teeth was rotten? Damn it, listen to me.
Minerva poked the ground with her trowel.
Give me a damn number. Give it to me.
She poked the ground again.
I ain't giving you no peace, old man. Not till you give me a number. Look at me, having to wear this nasty dress. I need to buy me a new one. The roof is leaking. The boy's in trouble with the police. I gets graveyard dirt on my porch. I'll be blocked. Business gets po.
With each complaint, Minerva jabbed the ground in the vicinity of Dr. Buzzard's ribs. Finally, she dropped the trowel into her shopping bag and pulled herself to her feet with a sigh. I slipped away and joined Williams at the edge of the graveyard. Moments later, Minerva approached us, muttering,
Stubborn old man, she said. I cuss his ass, but he still won't give me a number.
Haven't you won that numbers game by now, Minerva? Williams asked.
Yes, I won it, she said. One time I put $36 on 333, and that was the number.
How much did you win?
I should have won $10,000, but I didn't get one dime.
Why not?
The book had changed the number.
How could you let him get away with that?
He didn't get away with nothing, baby. I fixed it so he don't work no more. I went to his garden, and I gave him back his kindness. Now he's sickly, and we got us a new bookie.
As we were walking up the lane from the graveyard, Minerva gave Williams his parting instructions. He was to put the paper with Spencer Lawton's name into a jar filled with the water that had not run through any pipe. He was to place the jar in the darkness of his closet, where it would not be touched by the light of the sun or the glow of the moon until the trial was over. He was to cut a photograph of Lawton's face out of the newspaper, black out his eyes with the pen, first the right eye, then the left, draw 9 lines across his lips as if sewing them up, put the photograph in his coat pocket, and make sure a preacher touched his coat. Afterward, he was to burn the photograph in the exact spot where Danny Hansford had died.
Do that,
said Minerva.
Spencer Lawton will lose your case. But you must do one more thing, too. Once a day, every day, you must close your eyes and tell that boy you forgive him for what he done to you. And deep in your heart, you must truly forgive him. You hear?
I hear, said Williams. Minerva stopped at a turn-off to another road.
Now, go on back to Savannah and do like I say,
she said. Aren't you going home? Williams asked. Minerva patted her shopping bag.
Baby, I never takes graveyard dirt into my own house. I will deliver it first, and I must do that alone.
Williams was silent as we began the drive back. Are you going to follow Minerva's instructions about Spencer Lawton's picture? I asked. I might, said Williams. It's a little corny, but it could end up being good therapy. Sewing up his mouth, blacking out his eyes. Yes, that's something I might be able to get into. How about the daily message of forgiveness to Danny Hansford? Are you going to do that too? Definitely not, he said. Danny was nothing but a would-be murderer. Williams picked up his glass and drank what was left of his vodka and tonic. My case has come down to one thing and one thing only, he said. Money. Danny knew I had $25,000 in cash in that house. When my lawyer, Bob Duffy, arrived at Mercer House that night, he walked around inspecting the merchandise, picking up little objects and turning them bottom side up. When I asked him what he was going to charge to represent me, he said 50 big ones. Later, when I realized I needed a good criminal lawyer, I hired Bobby Lee Cook. Bobby Lee brought his wife to the house, and she picked out $50,000 worth of antiques. That was his fee. His expenses were in addition to that. He was assisted by John Wright Jones, who got $20,000, and now I will have to pay all over again for another trial. But Danny's mother takes the prize with her $10 million lawsuit against me, after all the anguish and grief Danny had caused her, after she'd thrown him out of her house and gotten police protection from him. Danny was suddenly her beloved dead son, miraculously transformed from a dangerous liability into an asset worth $10 million. Lord knows what it will cost me to defend myself against her lawsuit. So you see, it's all about money. And that's one of the reasons I love Minerva. You can laugh at that voodoo stuff if you want, but she only charged me $25 tonight. I don't know whether or not you got her point, but no matter how you look at it, she's a bargain. I did not answer, but it occurred to me that yes, I did get Minerva's point. I got her point very clearly. What I wondered was, did Williams?